This is the next in our series of mantra videos analyzing and breaking down specific Sanskrit mantras. And I'd like to look at this particular shloka or Sanskrit verse, which goes, Om namah shivaya gurave, Sac-cid-ānanda-mūrtaye, Niṣprapañcāya śantāya, Nirālambāya tejase. So this verse is commonly found throughout modern India. It's a fairly ubiquitous verse, and it's quite interesting. We can analyze it in a couple of different ways. So I'll break it down word by word. So the first line, we have the famous mantra Om namah shivaya, which means reverence to divine consciousness. Or if we want to translate Om, we can translate it as yes. Yes, reverence to divine consciousness, where we understand the word Shiva here in that sense of divine consciousness, not Shiva in the sense of a god among other gods, right? But then with the word gurave, now gurave is the word guru in the dative case. The dative case is the particular declension that you use in Sanskrit when you're offering reverence to so-and-so. So the word Shiva is in the dative case, shivaya, and the word guru is in the dative case. That means they're in apposition, which means they're being equated to each other, okay? So Shiva is the guru, is the primordial teacher. Divine consciousness is the ultimate guru principle, you could say. So the first line literally means reverence to Shiva, who is the guru, reverence to divine consciousness, which is the guru principle, meaning if one orients to the nature of one's deepest consciousness, then it reveals something about the nature of reality, right? So that the ultimate teacher is one's own deepest consciousness. But this divinity, Shiva, also manifests as all that teaches you, not just your own deepest consciousness, but all that teaches you in the whole world. So Shiva is the manifests as your guru, as your teacher, but also as all your teachers, as all that teaches you, right? That's the guru tattva, that consciousness is ever seeking to reveal itself to itself. And so the guru principle can manifest in countless different forms. But again, the ultimate teacher is your own deepest consciousness, which again is a meaning of the word Shiva. In a non-dual tradition, it is. Obviously, in a dualistic tradition, this interpretation does not apply. So, reverence to Shiva, who is the guru. Literal translation of namah shivaya gurave. But then we get more information about this Shiva, this divine consciousness. In the next line, Sac-cid-ānanda-mūrtaye. Okay, so divine consciousness expresses itself as being, awareness, and joy. Sat, Chit, Ananda. So here we come to just a common, very, very common misunderstanding, which is the important fact that Sat, Chit, and Ananda, being, awareness, bliss, when you put them together in a compound, then the Sanskrit grammatical rule of sandhi applies, whereby the final letter of the first two words changes its form in order to create a mellifluous flow with the following word. So when you're pronouncing it as a compound, it's not Sat, Chit, Ananda, it's Sac-cid-ānanda, as you see it written. Sac-cid-ānanda. So the T of Chit becomes a D, before following voiced vowel, and the T of sat becomes a C in compound, right? So if you're saying them separately, sat, chit, ananda, being, awareness, bliss, you put them in compound, Sac-cid-ānanda. Now here's an interesting thing though. There's two ways to read this compound. So you can read it as what's called a dvandva, where it means it's just a list, being, comma, awareness, comma, and bliss. Or you can read it as what's called a tatpurusha compound, meaning to say there's a relationship amongst the terms. If you read it that way, then Sac-cid-ānanda means the joy of the awareness of being. And this is something that's not commonly understood, that the compound can indeed be read in this way, and that this reading is at least as, or just as legitimate as the other reading. So Sac-cid-ānanda, the joy of awareness of being, the joy of the awareness of one's innate being, which is the innate being of all beings, right? That sat, that fundamental beingness, which is at the heart of everything, right? So the joy of awareness of innate being is one way to read that compound, Sac-cid-ānanda, or again, just as a list. So both readings are equally valid. There's no way in Sanskrit to tell which way of reading the compound the original author or revealer of the mantra intended. So then we have the word mūrtaye, which is the dative form of the word murti. So why is it in dative? Again, because it's agreeing, it's an apposition with shivaya and gurave. So these words are all in agreement, so they all go in the dative case. So some of you might have some training in grammar and understand what I'm saying. These days, training in grammar in any language is quite rare, so these terms can be confusing. Apposition means that the three words are agreeing in case, number, and gender, and that means they're all describing one and the same thing, this divine consciousness, right? So divine consciousness has the murti, has the expression. Murti can mean embodiment or form, but here it makes more sense to take it in the sense of expression. Divine, the Shiva, God, if you will, and that is one way to translate the word Shiva in this context. God expresses as being, awareness, and bliss. Or God expresses as the bliss of the awareness of being, Sac-cid-ānanda-mūrtaye. And everything I'm saying, by the way, is non-controversial, meaning to say if you talk to any properly trained Sanskritist, they will give the same breakdown of these words and of these compounds. So there's another popular misunderstanding, which is that Sanskrit words have so many different meanings, and that means you can interpret a Sanskrit verse in countless different ways. And that's actually not true. Yes, Sanskrit words sometimes have a large number of meanings. 20 different meanings of a word is not that uncommon, but there's something called context. And this is actually a rule in Sanskrit, that context determines which meaning is applicable. They're not all applicable at once. Context is quite a strict determiner, and actually each Sanskrit word in a given context usually only means one thing. Sometimes an author employs double meanings, double entendre, and words have two distinct meanings that are intended. But in a given context, each word generally means just one thing. There can be shades of other meanings. But anyway, my point is that actually, again, if you talk to any really properly well-trained Sanskritist, they're gonna give the same grammatical breakdown that I'm giving you. So, yeah. Okay, so we have the first two lines now. namah shivaya gurave, and Om as a bija mantra is not technically a part of the verse, right? This is a verse with 4 lines of 8 syllables each. So namah shivaya gurave, 8 syllables. Sac-cid-ānanda-mūrtaye, 8 syllables. Now, what comes next? Niṣprapañcāya. This word is also in the dative case, so we know it is agreeing that we have these agreements. So it's also describing Shiva. Shiva, the divine, or the divine consciousness, which is the guru, which expresses as awareness, as being awareness and bliss, or the bliss of being, of awareness of being, is also Niṣprapañcāya. So Niṣprapañcāya, that this Shiva is also Niṣprapañcāya. Now here's an interesting thing, because this verse is often recited in a Vedantic context, in which Niṣprapañcāya means it means absolutely still, not doing anything, not manifesting anything, static, still, quiescent consciousness, right? So in the Vedantic teaching, consciousness is not dynamic, it's static, it's still. So manifestation is an illusion, right? And of course, people can argue that, oh, there's other branches of Vedanta that don't teach this. True, but the dominant branch of Vedanta in the medieval era definitely taught a Mayavada, that manifestation is an illusion. Nothing has ever manifested, nothing's ever happened, nothing ever will happen. Consciousness is absolutely still, Niṣprapañcāya. But this is the opposite of the tantric doctrine, that consciousness actually manifests a whole universe, that the universe is real, not an illusion. So if this verse is cited in a tantric context, then we take a different meaning of Niṣprapañcāya, which is ever expansive, ever opening up and expressing more of itself. Okay, so how is this completely opposite meaning of the word possible? Well, I'll tell you, since we're getting into the geeky grammatical details in this video. Prapancha means expanding, right? Prapanch, to stretch, expand, diffuse, and spread. So nish, the prefix nish, can be a negator or an intensifier. And so in the Vedantic context, it's read as a negator, that this consciousness is never moving. It never actually does anything. It's absolutely still, right? And this is a transcendentalist view that Tantra rejected, okay? So again, there are forms of Vedanta, especially in modern times, that don't teach this. But classical Vedanta is a transcendentalist view, and in which consciousness is not dynamic. It has no Shakti. It's absolutely still, okay? But in the Tantric context, then, this nish prefix is read as an intensifier, that this consciousness is ever expansive. It's ever expressing more of itself. It delights in ever expressing more of itself. It's always opening out, that this process of the unfolding of consciousness is always happening. So that this, of course, I would argue, seems to correspond to reality much better, even in a very literal sense. We now know, and they didn't know back then, that the universe is literally expanding, and it's going to go on expanding for at least hundreds of billions of years. Though physicists tell us that process will come to an end and a whole new universe will be born. So, Niṣprapañcāya, ever expansive, or never expansive, depending on if you're a classical Vedantin or a Tantrika. So then the next word is śantāya, peaceful, quiescent. So again, if we're reading the verse in a tantric context, then we see these two terms as in dynamic tension. That divine consciousness is ever expansive, ever expressing more of itself, and yet completely peaceful and still at the same time. How is this possible? Because of the doctrine of Shiva and Shakti, that there are these two aspects to consciousness, that it can be simultaneously dancing and yet still. And this makes sense only, I would say, experientially. It doesn't make sense conceptually, but it does in direct experience. You can have the experience of dynamic movement, activity, and stillness at the same time, right? And this is taught also in Taoist tradition, the doctrine of Wu Wei, actionless action, right? Where all the activity is happening and yet you feel there's no doer. It's all happening spontaneously, and there's stillness at the same time, right? So this is, again, how a tantrika would read the verse. Right? In a Vedantic context, this word śantāya, again in the dative case, chaturthi vibhakti, if you learn Sanskrit in India, is just reinforcing. This word śantāya is just reinforcing Niṣprapañcāya. It never does anything, and it's totally still. But again, in the tantric context, it's ever expansive and yet at the same time still, right? So kind of like that actionless action in Taoism, Wu Wei. Next line, Nirālambāya tejase. This divine consciousness, or God, Shiva, is Nirālambāya. It is free of the need for any external support. It is free, it needs nothing outside itself. So remember, in the non-dual teaching, you are Shiva. You are this divine consciousness. So it's telling you something about you, that you need nothing outside yourself. But what you do need to do is discover that there's more to you than you could ever imagine. There's more to what you are than you perceive from the point of view of your conditioned mind. So if you discover the whole of what you are, you'll discover there's nothing you need outside yourself. It just seems like you do because you don't know the whole of yourself yet, right? So, this is another word that can be read in a transcendentalist way. And again, Vedantins and others did read it this way, Nirālambaṃ. I don't need anything outside myself. I don't need relationships. I can just, live in a cave. But in the tantric context, we read it in a different sense, that it's an invitation to discover that there's way more to you, to what you are, than you realize, that in fact, the whole pattern of the universe is contained within you. And the inner world is just as rich and diverse and powerful as the entire, apparently, external universe, which actually mirrors to you the whole of what's inside of you. So if you discover this, you become Nirālambaṃ, free of the need for any external support, free of needing anything outside of yourself. Okay? Again, in the dative case, Nirālambāya. And then finally, we get the word tejase, again in the dative case. So tejase in the dative case becomes tejase. Tejas means radiant, effulgent, fiery, energetic, brilliant. Beautiful word. Tejase. So, in the context of yoga, and tantric yoga is said to bring tejas. If you do the tapas, if you do the disciplined practice of tantric yoga, then you become more radiant, more brilliant, more alive. Tejase, right? This consciousness of its very nature is brilliant. It's a radiant consciousness. And that's discovered through spiritual practice. Okay, so let's see if there's any questions. Okay. Yeah, okay. So we've pretty much gone through every word fairly thoroughly. There's many different ways to sing this mantra. So Manorama has a beautiful version that goes, Om namah shivaya gurave Sac-cid-ānanda-mūrtaye Niṣprapañcāya śantāya Nirālambāya tejase. And that's lovely. I also like to sing it in a beautiful, more traditional Indian raga, in which the last line is repeated a couple of times. And so that way of singing it goes like this. Om namah shivaya gurave Sac-cid-ānanda-mūrtaye Niṣprapañcāya śantāya Nirālambāya tejase Nirālambāya tejase Nirālambāya tejase. Yeah, it's a bit intoxicating. I get intoxicated singing it in that raga. I received that way of singing it from the wonderful Maharashtrian Indian singer Vijahāti. So what a beautiful shloka, what a beautiful mantra, what an interesting sort of pivot point, because again, you can read it in this transcendentalist Vedantic way or in this Shakti-filled tantric way. So this verse, again, is found in many different texts. It's found in many different scriptures. Its original origin is unknown. But in one of the places we find it in this particular Yoga Upanishad, which is a late, a kind of tantric influenced, but also Vedantic kind of synthesis. I'm actually forgetting the name of the Upanishad where the verse occurs. But I'll look it up. But it occurs with another verse, and there's a pair. It occurs as a pair of verses in this particular Upanishad. So a colleague of mine, Chris Tompkins, made the argument that this is the original location of the verse, therefore it must be read in conjunction with this other verse. And I don't agree with that. I don't think this is the original location at all. This is a fairly late Yoga Upanishad, and we find the verse in many other sources as well. However, it's interesting to note that in this particular Yoga Upanishad, which might be 15th century or something, it occurs with this other verse. And this other verse goes, Nirālambaṃ samāśritya sālambaṃ vijahāti yah samāśritya cha yogī cha kaivalyaṃ padam aśnute. And that means having taken refuge in this innate being which needs nothing outside of itself, having taken refuge in that which needs nothing outside of itself, meaning your essence nature, one jettisons, vijahāti, one jettisons all dependencies. The person who has done that is a true renunciate, is a real yogi, and that person attains the state of absolute freedom. And this is another verse that can definitely be read in sort of transcendentalist terms, but need not be. Again, one who takes refuge in the supportless, that which needs nothing outside itself, Nirālambaṃ, jettisons all dependencies or all external supports. That person is a real renunciate, samāśritya. That person is a real yogi, and that person attains the state of absolute freedom. So, sung, it would sound like Nirālambaṃ samāśritya sālambaṃ vijahāti samnyāsī cha yogī cha kaivalyaṃ padam aśnute. Okay. Now again, it's not. I think it's not actually true that you need to read the first verse in conjunction with the second. That's only true in that particular Yoga Upanishad. There's a whole class of literature, by the way, you might not have heard of, called the Yoga Upanishads. Several dozen Yoga Upanishads, which are late texts, late medieval texts that are kind of synthesis of yoga, tantra, Vedanta, and they're quite interesting, but in general are rehashing material from earlier sources, different streams of the earlier tradition. Okay, so let's finish by singing that verse one more time in that beautiful raga. I'm also forgetting the name of I've been singing it this way for years, and I've totally forgotten now the name of the raga. So sorry about that. My memory is good, but not perfect. Anyway, let's just immerse in the vibration of the mantra. Om namah shivaya gurave Sac-cid-ānanda-mūrtaye Niṣprapañcāya śantāya Nirālambāya tejase Nirālambāya tejase Nirālambāya tejase. Om. Love and blessings to all of you in this beautiful kula, this beautiful community, whether you're part of the Tantric Yoga Now Facebook group, whether you're watching on the YouTube channel, wherever you're contacting this material and the transmission of these mantras and teachings that I'm so blessed to share, that I received from my teachers and from this beautiful tradition. Thank you for being part of this community. And love and blessings to each and every one of you. May the realization of our true nature bless your life. And may you directly experience everything that this beautiful verse is talking about. And for those who missed the previous video, I'm sitting here in front of this new set that we've built, little set we've built in my house. You don't see the whole thing right now, but there, oh look, there's Ganapati. Hello, Ganesha. And we built the set to film the new content for the new comprehensive tantric yoga and philosophy curriculum website, which we're going to build out over the next few years. The initial launch will hopefully be this summer. And there'll be other teachers on that platform besides me as well. And we hope to make it the most comprehensive and impactful learning portal for tantric yoga practice and tantric philosophy, ultimately in the world, in the English language, of course. Yeah. So blessings for that endeavor too. Please send your blessings to that. May all beings benefit. Om.